Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon podcast. Happy Wednesday. I hope you're having a lovely week so far, enjoying an international break that was needed in many ways. But we've got a very special episode for you today. We are speaking to Marcia Lewis of Number One Fan Club. Had a lovely conversation with Marcia. She's a really lovely person. Marcia runs Number One Fan Club, which is a support resource for parents, carers, and so on, going through academy football. Marcia, you'll probably know better as Miles Lewis Skelly's mum. You've probably seen videos of her sort of circulating on social media. Through her experience, no background in football at all. She did a master's in football business, sort of educated herself on football, and is now providing resources to support parents in their sort of academy football journey. It was a really, really brilliant conversation. Marcia is so great. She's so passionate. I learned a lot. And yeah, hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Without further ado, here is Marcia Lewis. Marcia, thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Why don't we start really, really broad with what is Number One Fan Club?
Number One Fan Club. Basically, we're an organisation that helps to support parents and guardians who are navigating the youth football industry. And that's from grassroots right through to the professional game. So we provide basically community support, resources, information, bring together, facilitate workshops, event so that parents have access to industry information that's going to help them with the development of their kids. And it's not about, how can I get my kid to be a professional, what kick-ups or Cruyff turns they should be doing at all. It's more about the well-being side to protect our kids. And also as a parent, how do we stay sane in this process, right? This mad world of football. And yeah, we offer different perspectives and views and bring in all sorts of people to help with that.
Before we get into specifics, are there any other organisations like Number One Fan Club? Because I personally haven't heard of it, and I presume some of this is handled by the club. How does that sort of interaction work?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't think anyone's doing anything like us, where we're a parent-led organisation. And also we're dealing with things that are beyond what a club should deal with. Like we're dealing about football business as well. I mean, I studied a master's in football business, and I understand like the industry, like why it is like it is from the top down. And that influences how we think about football as a parent and why, money is often on some parents' radar or what is it about brands that want to sponsor kids so young? So having all of this inside knowledge helps us to create something that's quite unique that parents just don't have access to. Right, it's quite a closed industry, so we're picking up those topics that are really important that can make or break the experience of a family and of a child. And I think for us, we often talk about the kids and their development and their enjoyment, and sometimes obviously the issues with kids at the end of the system that don't, in quotes, make it. I don't like that term, but you know what I mean. But actually what we're not dealing with is that parental responsibility and support from the start. Like there's no point waiting until your child is 16 and is being released from an academy and, all your world ends. We need to, I don't like to use the word empower ourselves, but inform ourselves of what we can do early on to prevent that happening, or to prevent those feelings and emotions overtaking our kids' lives. And as a parent, also, like, we've interviewed parents that have struggled mentally, like they've had mental health issues by trying to navigate a world they just don't know. So we're trying to support them because if we're okay, our kids are okay. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That happy mummy, happy child.
And I presume the sort of parental support varies from club to club. Would it be a fair assessment to say maybe the top clubs, there's more support available and lower down you go, there's less? Is that fair or?
I would say no.
Okay.
I would say, first of all, the parental support is piecemeal. There's not an initiative to support parents. What clubs will do is where they can, they'll run workshops. I mean, I've sat in on nutritional workshops over the years. I've sat in on social media work. They're very, standard, I would say. They're kind of the obvious stuff, and some are better than others. And again, not just for me, speak to many parents in many different clubs. But yeah, some clubs will have more resources, but it doesn't mean to say they're delivering it better. And in fact, I've seen and met with player care teams of Cat 3 clubs that are doing a fantastic job of supporting the kids and offering things to parents as well. So yes, resources no doubt are tight the lower down the categories you go, but it doesn't mean to say that the quality is not as good. Sometimes it's really bad in the Cat 1 clubs, to be fair.
Yeah, I can see that. You've mentioned already something about your masters and the aftercare, and I want to get into all of that. But before we do that, let's go back. So you, from listening to you on other podcasts, you didn't have a background in football at all. There was no sort of connection there. This has all sort of come through your journey. So I'd love to hear more about how you got into this and sort of Number One Fan Club, sort of the idea came about.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I've no interest in football. My dad was a cricketer. He used to play cricket for the RAF. So I got 4 sisters. Football never featured. Football only became a thing because Miles was an active child. Like, he was all over the place from very, very young. And going out and about, you just see kids on a football field. Like, okay, well, there's kids. Let's throw him in there, burn off some energy. He'll sleep tonight. So that's really the reason for getting into it. He enjoyed it. Miles, for me, as an only child, I only have him. He's, his dad. He's got brothers, from his dad on his dad's side. But so he was always interested in being around other kids, and he loved it. So fast forward, getting involved in pre-academy at Chelsea, and then choosing Arsenal. Logistically, it was round the corner, so that helped. We didn't choose it. He really wasn't bothered, so we did. Okay, well, it's near, so that'll do.
It's closest.
It's the closest, right? And it had to fit in around my life, and I became a single parent, so logistically it was all on me. But what I found was, and to be fair, I used to think of it as a posh youth club, nothing else. It was free. He's enjoying it. Get on with it. I'd go do my Sainsbury's shop for 2 hours while he's training, or do my extra work. So it was a hobby that he was enjoying. That's it. As things progressed, things started to come our way. Agents would call. He was about 11. Brands wanted to sponsor him around 12. I was like, this doesn't feel right, and it wasn't that I knew the rules or the law, because there are rules around, what can and can't be done. But as a gut instinct of a mum who just knows their kids enjoying football, I didn't want to engage in all of that. I didn't understand it. And for me, I wanted to know more before even going down that road. And I'm glad I did. It served me well. And that's really the starting point of feeling overwhelmed by some of this stuff.
Is that when you did the masters? Is that sort of what inspired that?
Yeah, I guess the masters came actually during COVID. I had some time, as you do.
As we all did. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just became interested. I didn't even know, and I kid you not, like what the Premier League was. When I started to listen to Talk Sport, I made it my point to listen to Talk Sport every day. And I think, why are these? They're talking about teams. I'd look on a table and I think, hang on, it's number 1 and now it's number 3. And I couldn't work out why teams were moving up and down, because I didn't realize that, like, the point system. So that was, and I just found it quite interesting how people talk about football. And yeah, just wanting to know more. So I was, I learned a lot from TalkSport and One Football and, the transfer markets, and just really starting to understand it. The Masters, what that helped me do was give me a much wider perspective of why the industry is so popular. What is it about the fan base? Like, what is it about the development of clubs and the management of clubs and where the money comes from? Like, why is there so much money in football, right? And you start to learn and understand how that works. And I did, a couple of assessments, or actually 4 assessments. And, I used to use Arsenal as my case study. And yeah, I learned a lot about the academy system, development, operations, accounts, marketing, all that sort of stuff. But to be honest, and not to gloat about the Masters, but to me, the gold in the whole of that period was doing my thesis. And that was about the parent experience in elite academies. And I focused on the ages of 15 to about 20, parents of 15-year-olds to 20-year-olds, that really crucial stage where we hear so much about the fallout of football. And it was a qualitative study, and that's when you're actually interviewing people. I interviewed about 18 families from different clubs in and around London. I didn't focus on Arsenal, so it wasn't an Arsenal-based study at all. In fact, I don't know that I had anyone from Arsenal. But what it did is that sitting down, talking to parents for like an hour and a half about their journey, it was like, wow, I was learning, right, about what's to come, potentially, if Mars progressed. But there was some deep-rooted challenges that the industry had. And I was like, who's helping me? Who's helping everyone? Who's going to help me? Like, who's going to help us? And, it was obvious from the results that what was missing was parent support. Like, this is a unique industry, and we're expected to just flounder through it and come out okay, when the stats show most of our kids are not going to be professional footballers. But the system doesn't really account for, okay, how do we manage that as parents? How do we help our kids with expectations? Theirs and our own, right? Because it's so easy to get carried away with stuff. So the study basically helped me think, okay, that's what needs to happen. Yeah.
It's amazing to me that there's not some kind of standardized care for parents of academy kids, especially at Category 1 clubs, because they have more resources. Why do you think that is? Is it it's just never been thought about? What is that?
Look, I mean, the only thing I can think about is it's not their job. Like, football's a business, right? Their business is to develop talent. It's not to develop the parents developing the talent. That's to some degree, that's our responsibility. And it's a big task. It's not like working in this space now. It's a big task. And we come in all shapes and sizes, different backgrounds, different cultures, different understandings. English isn't always our first language. Some parents might have been footballers. Some, their economic, status is at such where they think football is something that's going to help their family. We come from so many backgrounds. Football isn't ready to manage that for parents that are so different. They're not. And is it their job? I'm not sure that it is. I think I would rather, as a parent, take control of that myself and be around other people that can help support us fully, because there are still the academy system, and our platform is not just about the academy system. So I'll sort of stress that we support parents from grassroots as well, because there's a lot going on there too. But our system is in itself is inconsistent in how we support the children, right? Like you said, there's Cat 1s, Cat 3s, and there's Cat 4, etc. There's an inconsistency there in player care, right? How do we expect them to also support resources? Like, player care is the most under-resourced area in football. How is that so? We're developing footballers. Why is player care, the most poorly paid people probably? And so I think it's unrealistic you can expect what you like, but I think it's unrealistic to clubs to all of a sudden, put in this massive parent program. Look, we're struggling, like knocking on door. There are some clubs that have been absolutely fantastic in opening their door to us. And I'm sure we'll talk about what we do provide, because they know it makes sense. It's like, anyone you talked about, number one fan, they're like, of course. Why? Of course the parents need support. I mean, this is a tricky, complex environment. But and we want to work with the industry so that it's a 360 approach to help the kids at the end of the day. But some people are still like skeptical. I don't want parents coming in to tell us what to do. Well, no, it's not about that. It's not about that at all. We can help you have a better outcome, have people think differently about the academy journey, about the experience, about what else our kids can get from it, rather than a professional contract. Because if this is a school, it'll be a failing school. But we can help you with the thought process, with the perspective and the expectations that parents are coming to this. If you open your minds to a different way of thinking, a different way of being. So we're and it's not just the clubs. Look, I don't mean saying that Premier League haven't exactly welcomed us with open arms either, and neither have the FA. And I think if they were to just be more open-minded about what we're doing and how we're doing it, we are not just parents that have been, don't have any experience. Not only do we have lived experience, but we're professionals in our own right, in our own industries. We've had jobs, we've had careers. We're some of our parents that are involved, are experts in safeguarding, in education, in well-being, in coaching, and facilitation of workshops. Like we're experienced people that want to come and add value and do something different in the industry. So just be open-minded to that.
Yeah. And it's amazing how you didn't use this word earlier, but I will. You've empowered yourself in that way to sort of take an interest. It's it's so amazing. I want to come back to it. Sort of the shape of, say, a workshop or something. For say you go into a club. Maybe you can give an example. Or you don't have to. What would you do? How would you lead? Say you had a day with a load of parents at a Cat 1 Academy. What would you do? How would that look?
Yeah, I mean, it tends not to be a day because they don't have a day. They're obviously working. So it's generally evening. And we do them online and we do them in person. So last night, I won't mention the club, but last night we did a workshop, and the night before we done two. So the first night we did what we call supporting parents through the scholarship decision, right? So scholarship is a period where a child is 15 to 16. It's a massive deal, and they're either going to be told they're going to be kept on for another 2 years of development and education, or they'll need to leave the club, right? Now, our workshop basically says, look, this is going to be challenging for you, but here's some resources that we can help you with in how to get your kid through that, starting with early. So we have, things that we can do, starting conversations early, how to, share the news with family and friends. So they're not always asking, oh, did he get it or don't he? This is going to be a tough time, but also practical guidance on what we can do to find the next club, to have those conversations with agents if that's what you want to do. There's a whole piece around the agent relationship as well, and also for ourselves being aware that this period of GCSEs, possibly exit trials, taking your child up and down the country, finding out what you can actually manage to help your child with this next phase. There's a lot to it. And one of my colleagues, she's been through it twice with kids in an academy, so she's had to step up and support her child, and also emotionally yourself. It's almost like a death of a friend when someone's described it to me when your child is not in an academy, as a parent, that is. You've had 10 years of socializing on the sidelines too, so it's emotional for you as it's emotional for your child. But we don't want at this point our kids to see us sort of, crying and blubbering and it's the end of our lives, because actually they're the ones that need the support. So the workshop basically is interactive. We give guidance. We talk about our own experiences. Mars has never been released from an academy. So I talk more around the business side and managing expectations of this from a business perspective, because you'll have, interest, and then sometimes you won't have any. So how do you help facilitate that? What next? And then there's the settling into the new environment. If your child does go to a new club, there's all the emotions and feelings and mindset work that we need to help our children with, because going to a new environment where kids have grown up together for 10 years, fitting in is it can be very challenging too. So they're practical things that we can support on. The other workshop we did, we call being a number one fan. And that is, especially for early people coming into the environment, what to expect, like what this is and what it isn't, and how you can manage it in a way that will set you up and set your family up for success in terms of enjoying the journey and not looking at the end goal. Like, what can you take from this? And also we help deal with the identity piece, the how do you cope with your mates saying, oh, but they can buy you a house soon or buy you a car, and all that sort of stuff. So it's very practical sharing of our experiences, that of others that we've researched and spoken to, and giving guidance. We are not teaching parents how to parent. That's up to them. But we are opening their eyes to new perspectives, new way of thinking, and different viewpoints.
Yeah. You sort of briefly touched on it there, and I do want to come on to this because, imagining myself, hopefully having children and stuff down the line, that pressure, especially at, the bigger clubs, of someone knowing your name at sort of 12, 13 years old and conversations starting to happen online. And, not only, yes, as you mentioned, your friends and sort of go, you're going to get a scholarship and all that sort of stuff. That pressure, that aspect on the media side, but also from your nearest and dearest. What advice do you have? How do you deal with that? And how did you deal with that? Because that must have been part of your journey as well.
Yeah. So from my perspective, and this is what we offer in the workshop, our own perspectives. And for me, I was always very early on adamant that Miles doesn't need to be on social media, right? So it wasn't until quite late, 14, 15. So he didn't have the interest. It's like, and also for me as well, we have to be the gatekeepers of this, right? When Mars was on social media, and it was Instagram, it still has, if you look now, it still doesn't have that many posts, right? Probably been maybe 2 to 3 years. I'm on there too. Like I'm there watching agents, come into social media. I'm watching women, not girls, but women come into his social media. I'm watching people trying to sell him watches and, seats in nightclubs. I've got the eyes on it. And you know what? I'm going to address it. And I did that once. A young man was talking about, he can, I think it was watches if he needs any shopping or any personal shopping. I said, mate, he's 16. He doesn't have a job. Like, what are you doing? This is unacceptable. And this is where there is the mental health, because you're selling all these things into our children and they're thinking about, this dream, I want this, I see everybody else having it, and they're getting themselves into serious trouble. And then when it ends, all that stuff that they've been sold is about what? So you've got to, for me, I needed to cut it off and address it. And to be fair, this one particular young man, apologized. And I told him what it was doing to society and these young people who are very impressionable. And he apologized. And I actually met him
Really?
at a game. Yeah. I actually met him at the game. Yeah. But his excuse was that, I didn't realize how old Mars was. No, you did. You Google Mars. You know exactly how old he is. That's unacceptable behavior. So for me, parents have to take responsibility, but sometimes you don't actually realize that this goes on because we give our kids far too much freedom in this industry than we should. I want Miles to become a young man that takes control, but it takes a bit of education around this industry because it's so unique, it's so brutal, it's so toxic, and it also can be an amazing place to work, right? And to develop in, and the experiences you get. But we have to understand it ourselves first in order to teach our kids. And until you see it happening, it's quite difficult to get your head around.
Yeah. Well, I can feel your passion. It's amazing. And I'm so glad that Miles had someone like you to sort of look after that. But there must be cases where parents don't know what's happening on their kids' social media, and that's happening. Yeah. Is there anything the clubs can do to sort of deal with that? Because, I look at, just taking Arsenal as an example, there's constant conversation online all day about certain players in the academies. And our policy on the podcast, but also just generally, is before they're at, U21, U18 level, I don't want to hear about them because they're so young. Mm. Is there anything a club can do, or do you think it's basically just down to the parents to try and deal with that?
Listen, I mean, I think two things. I think there is definitely down to the parents, right? Like there's a child has no business being on Twitter.
Yeah.
And there are rules around Instagram, but also there's, the voice of mum and dad. And I'm not trying to be judgmental, but we have to look at ourselves, right? First and foremost, because the club will have their own intentions, right? And football is a business. So being exposing the academy system, and some there is protection as well. To be fair, there is protection, but exposing the academy system and their games. I think it's only probably under 18 you'll see it sort of publicized, and which is fine. It's a business. They're trying to help the world to see their players so that they can sell them, but also they have a pathway elsewhere. So it helps the young people too. Younger than that, some academies will do workshops around social media, for example. But I personally believe that it's our responsibility to upskill ourselves on the damage and the consequences, and the benefits as well. There can be benefits somewhere out there. So but I think we can help each other. Like the clubs won't invest that money in parent education. Let's just get that right. But they can work with companies like Number One Fan to help them with that. Right? We do the work. Okay, you have to pay for it, but it gets done. And that's a tick in your box. And that's parents that are better informed.
Yeah. And leads to better outcomes. I
Hopefully better
want to change gears slightly to sort of the aftercare that you mentioned earlier. I'm aware that I think it's Trent Alexander-Arnold has just started a sort of initiative to help people who've left the academy on the other side and maybe didn't get a deal at the club they were at, whatever it might be. Is that something Number One Fan Club deals with, and sort of what are your views on how you can sort of manage that journey?
Yeah, I mean, again, these organizations like Trent's that we'd love to work with, they have access to parents, and it's the parents that we want to help so they can help the kids. So we don't facilitate how we don't have contacts and networks in that sense. But what we can do is help parents with the practical guidance on that next step of the journey. From, again, our experiences from listening to or working with other professionals in the industry. We speak to scouts, we speak to agents, we speak to sports lawyers, so we have a rounded view of this next step, but it is around the parent experience that helps their kids. But the answer is yes, we can support in that area.
I'm also curious, how much, and I suppose this is a bit of a piece of string question, but how much do parents get involved in the actual football development, and sort of how would you advise that? Because it must be difficult when, say you have a football background, you see your child being told to, play in a certain position, you think, I'm not sure he's right for that position, or that must be a weird sort of relationship where you want to leave it to the clubs, but the more you learn, you start to develop your own opinions, or you might have your own background anyway. How do you sort of help parents with that?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it's more of a wider view around your kids are there because they're being developed in football. Like you've chosen to put your child there. That whilst a child might want to have been scouted and gone, we've made that decision that that's the right club, right? So it's a bit like a school, and you make that decision that's the right school. Sometimes you don't have a choice. I get that. You kind of leave it to the teachers to do their job, right? And sometimes we don't agree. I've had moments where I might not have agreed with something a teacher may have done or said, but there are ways to communicate that and respond to it. But my personal view is that our kids are there to be developed in the way that their academy has chosen, or grassroots club or whatever. And we have a choice to, if we don't agree with something, to address it in a respectful way, or decide, it's not for you. But I think that as parents we need to step back and let that happen. If there's a safeguarding issue, if there's a well-being issue, then you need to step in and address it. But in terms of, the mum or the dad knowing all about football and trying to interfere, direct, whatever, it doesn't go down well, because the coaches are there to do their job, and that's coach. And we're not always going to agree. We're not. Football is about opinions. And look, academies will tell you they get it wrong sometimes. Like when kids, we see it in the media that some young players are released because they know they're not seen as the right fit for that club, and they go on and they make an amazing career. It happens. They're humans as well. But there's also something to be said about versatility. And again, I don't know football. I'm still learning, and I get a lot of my insights from Miles. But everyone knows him as a midfielder. I mean, look, but he's getting his chance as a left back. Who
doing very
knew?
well.
He's doing all right.
Yeah.
But that's not for me to go into the club and say, well, Arteta, he's a midfielder, don't you? That's not my job. That's their job.
Yeah.
So.
But I suppose at first team level, it's with someone like a Mikel Arteta, that's over there. But I imagine lower down there might be a little bit more friction. But I suppose you would say just leave it to the clubs.
Just leave it. Right. Personally, I just leave it to the club. Or if you're really unhappy and it's you think your child is not being developed in the way that they should, then leave the club. Like we're not held to ransom, right? There are rules around, there are rules and regulations around moving clubs and compensation. There's a whole, kind of legal stuff that's involved at certain ages of your kids when you have been in the academy for a certain amount of time. So, and that can be tricky too, right? That can be tricky to navigate. And I'm not personally, I don't agree with some of the rules around that, but we are the parents and we need to stay the parents. And if we're not happy, I think we have to take control of that situation. In the same way, if your kid wasn't happy at school, you'd need to address it. And if it's still not right, then you need to take, further action.
Agents, boot deals, all that sort of stuff. When the
favorite topic.
When the commercial side comes in, because that must be tough, especially at the age they're at. And I imagine this is really where something like you can really help someone is navigating that. How does that all work? And you mentioned sort of rules and regulations. I presume there are a lot of regulations. I hope covering that.
There are some. And again, it's a tricky one. And if you don't know the rules, you could end up in a very sticky situation. Like there are rules on when you can approach a child from an agent's perspective. And then there are different rules, or rather no rules, around brand sponsorship. So then sometimes you engage with an agent to help you with a brand deal too early. And then you've got an agent in your life that now you owe them something because they've helped you with it. Yeah. So it can get quite complicated, to be fair. And that's why, education for parents about the industry is really important. It's a tricky world. I mean, the agent thing.
What are the rules? What specifically?
So it's just the basic rules so that an agent can't approach. An approach could be approaching the parent, approaching the child, and social media, emails on the sidelines, not before the year the child turns 16.
Right.
So when an agent was calling me at age when Miles was 11, that's a no-no, right? Now, my gut instinct was not to engage, but someone else's gut instinct might be total flattery and, wow, you represent who? Wow, my child must be amazing. Child's 11. What do you know? Right? So, and the rules are that if you engage, there are penalties. There are penalties for the agent and there are penalties for the parent and the player. So ultimately, if it is found out and if it goes horribly wrong or whatever, there are consequences for engaging. So at the very least, understand the rules. So if you choose to do something else, you know the consequences, right? The whole brand thing as well, I think it's understanding that there is no age limit when, brand can want to give you a boot deal. But what is a boot deal? What really is a boot deal, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So what does it really mean? And what does it mean for your kid who is head to toe in a brand at age 10? And then 3 or 4 years down the line, they're not playing football anymore. But on social media, thanks for my new boots. Thanks for this. That, when it doesn't go right, is detrimental to a child's well-being. That is a parent responsibility. The brand doesn't care. They're just looking, casting their net wide, which one's going to make it to the big time. It costs them nothing to give you a boot deal. And what we don't understand as parents is that brand partnerships are relationships. They're for the long term, right? It's not a one-way relationship. It's a work in progress. Do you understand what the brand deal? Do you understand what the contract is? Anyone ever read a brand deal contract?
No.
Well, yeah. You'll soon know that when you want to come out of it, it's not as easy as you think. You can't decide one day, I like Adidas. Oh, tomorrow I like Nike. No. There are contractual obligations. And there's a lot to learn. And we're not saying that parents shouldn't engage in these deals early on. Look, boots are expensive, right? So I think I've calculated, I don't know, a good few hundred pairs you've had to go through. And thankfully, the club that Mars was at, they paid for boots. Not every club pays for boots, right? So it is a huge expense for parents. So I can see why it's encouraging, but it doesn't mean if you've been offered a brand deal, it doesn't mean that your kid is the next superstar. For every one, they've done it in about 4 or 5 others in the same club, and then times that by how many clubs there are around the UK. They're like sweets.
Is there any punishment? Who would do the punishment if a club or a brand or an agent or whatever approached a child underage? Is it unregulated?
No, it's the FA.
The FA do they?
Well, you'll have to ask them. They have a dispute. No, I mean, look, the FA do. Yes, there is a process, and there is a disputes. There is a division in the in FIFA and in the FA that regulate all of this stuff. But a lot of the time, it doesn't get reported. It doesn't get reported because when it goes wrong, there is shame on the parent side, and also the agent business, and I'm not going to get down on it because agents are a necessary part of the business and they really help the careers of young people and, the professional players in the industry. So they are a necessary part, and they do have a poor reputation, some of it deserved and some of it not deserved, right? And the whole point of our platform is actually to strengthen those relationships and help parents understand how to find the right agent, the right questions, so they can go to the table being on a semi-equal footing, being armed with what they need to get a decent conversation. On the agent side, the benefit is that you're talking to parents that know what they're doing. You're not going to be asked for brown paper envelopes under the table, because that works both ways too, right? Sometimes agents are telling me, look, parents are coming with these like, I want a hat. Hey, what are you going to give me? Right? And they're having to deal with that. And that's not right either. So it's understanding, and there are rules. There are rules. And there are regulations, but everyone else knows them in the industry except the parents.
Yeah.
So it's important that we understand. And that's why, I took the agent license. And I passed. So I am a licensed agent. I don't represent kids. That's not what I want to do. But I did it because I want to be able to help parents understand the industry. I remember when the regulations changed in the last nearly almost 2 years now. And they re-regulated the industry. Agents have to have licenses, etc. And there were seminars up and down the country where agents obviously were up in arms about what this meant. And, the whole thing went a little bit, skew-whiff because, FIFA have put rules in that certain countries have now managed to overturn. But there were seminars and conferences, agents were attending left, right and centre. But who was telling the parents what these new regulations mean for them? Because when you have youngsters, you are the ones that are signing the paperwork. Like, who's telling you? Right. So that's where more can be done in the industry. And that's where I believe that Number One Fan helps to fill those gaps.
Absolutely.
And that means it's a win-win for everyone, not just the parents, but the other stakeholders as well.
Is there a specific thing in those conversations that parents do get burned by? Say there was someone listening to this and you sort of, you could say, watch out for that. Is there anything that sort of springs to mind?
I mean, look, it's all about asking the right questions. The agent world is a very powerful world. Not just the big agents are the best. There are small agents, medium-sized agencies, and I think sometimes we can get kind of the whole bright lights kind of syndrome of, well, that person represents that person, so they must be amazing. And I think that's where probably we don't do our homework enough. Naturally, agents want to represent the cream of the crop, right? So they're going to show you the cream of the crop. But actually, the questions around, well, what do you do when they're not playing so well, when they're injured, when their contract's unlikely to be extended in this club and they're going to need a new one, and how can you help with the well-being aspect, what access? There's lots of questions. I mean, that's just a few beyond who they represent, because of course they're going to show you the great stuff, but it's the ones that can really help you in the times of distress is really important. And yeah.
You must have had some amazing times following youth football. I'd love to hear, because do you get to travel? Do you get to see sort of, and what's been your sort of, I suppose, your highlights of that journey? Because it must be, yes, incredibly difficult, and it's a new world, but also, what an experience, especially when it's come to where it's come to.
Listen, don't get me wrong, I've loved the experience, and I think because I've come to it with no expectations, none.
Probably best, honestly.
Yeah, I love having no information in that sense, but I'm not naturally someone that's it's Mars' journey, and it always has been. And by the way, I'm not the only one. I always say it takes a village to raise a child. So Mars has a dad. I know his name doesn't get popped up there enough, but he's very reserved and quite quiet and just does his bit, in the way that he does. But we have a village. We have it's other friends and family and other parents that I've met on this journey as well that have provided support as a community. So that's been amazing. And of course, watching my child as any parent, watching them develop and grow, but enjoy it. And I think that's been the most beautiful thing is seeing him evolve, coming here, smile. I've never known him to say, I don't want to go training today. I've never known him not wake up. I've never had to set an alarm to get him up. No, the same for school. But he's that's where he is enjoying. And kudos to the club. They've helped with that. But also the age group that he's always been around. That's different. Different club, same club could have a different experience. It's a bit like being at school. If you're in a class of, sometimes kids can have an amazing school life, others not so much. And that could be to do with their cohort. So, but Mars is his own person. He's a people person. And he's very sociable and he's chilled. He's a chilled kid. So he's enjoyed the journey. I've enjoyed watching him. I've enjoyed the travel that I've been able to do, but it's expensive. And that's what, we sell it as, yes, you'll be able to go abroad and the tournaments, but that costs money. We're regular people with some of us have jobs, some of us don't have jobs, some of us are single parents, some of us are low-income families. They are not going on the tours and the tournament to Ibiza. They're not. So that side of it is not going to be something that everyone, is fulfilled by, because it's not equal. And it's not always fair. Football isn't always fair, but it's not everyone can enjoy that. Not everyone gets to the training. Not everyone has a job that at 4:30 they can kick off work and go take their kid to start at 5:30. No. And there were times where I worked in the city, my life would be, my days would be long, and what do? Tell your employer, so sorry, I've got to go to take my child. No. So it isn't easy for parents. So yeah, but that's also a choice we have to decide is can we fit this in around our life, or maybe it's something we have to do a bit later when that, mostly we want to try and fit it in because you do, right? It's football, but it's not by any means easy. And especially I've only got one, but there are parents that have two kids,
3 or 4, in
academies, other kids at home, other interests. It's a juggle.
Yeah.
It's a juggle.
Yeah. Just beginning to wrap up. So number one, we've spoken about the workshops. you've got does number one have a podcast itself, or you have your own podcast?
Yeah, we have two. We have two. We have
two.
a parent podcast called Behind the Boots, and we have a professional in the industry podcast called The Real Sideline Experts.
Nice. You help support with agents. You help support with brands. You help support with well-being. Any other aspects of number one that we haven't necessarily covered?
Yeah, I think just, community. Like we provide a space, a safe space to explore. Like we have discussion forums, and it's not always easy to ask questions with your, a mum or dad on the sidelines, who will have their own opinion about something. But so we give a space to explore. We have live Q&As. We have events. Like we've had a really fantastic event in February. We'll have another one in March. Usually it's in a physical space, an opportunity to network with other parents from different clubs, different age groups. And then we have experts on our panels. We have parents on our panels. So the event space is really growing for us as well.
That must be amazing for parents to have that, because I always think about the parents who just I think about my mum. If I was involved in football, she would have absolutely wouldn't know anyone. And the only way is through your child, which in a way puts a bit of pressure on the child. And it's it must be really important.
We're here for your mum. You know what I mean? It's like
come on, Gail.
Come on, Gail. Bring it on. That's it. It's honestly, it can be a very lonely place because if you think about it, not everyone's particularly sociable either. I mean, sometimes I'd go to a training ground, I'd sit in my car. And not because I'm not sociable, because I am. But some people, they just, if they're there at all, by the way, because if you've got other kids at home that you just can't, your kids are getting to training themselves. Like Mars had a car journey. Like I took him to training or we got a taxi. But so it can be lonely. Who do you share it with? One of the ladies I met at one of the clubs we've been doing work with, she's in player care. And she's like, my brother plays football. I wish my mum had a resource like this when he was playing. Like, we hear it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is for those parents as well, for sure. More so.
Final question. You meet Marcia Lewis in November of 2014, 10 years ago. You get to say one thing about your academy journey and football journey. What do you say?
Enjoy it for what it is now. Like the present. Don't look to the Ballon d'Or.
It's coming.
We'll see. Enjoy it for now. It can be an incredible experience, but it's about how we come to it, how we show up to it, and how we let our kids get on with it.
Good advice, and good advice for life. Marcia, thank you so much. It's been really great.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.